Sat, Asat, Manaha, Cha, Dravyam, Vikaraha, Gunaha, Indriyani, Virat, Swarat, Sthasnu, Charishnu, Bhumnaha. Adyo Vatara Purusha Parasya. Adyo Vatara Purusha Parasya. Kala Swabhava Sarasanmanascha. Kala Swabhava Sarasanmanascha. Dravyang Vikaro Guna Indriyani. Dravyang Vikaro Guna Indriyani. Virat Swarat Sthasnu Charishnu Bhumnaha. Virat Swarat Sthasnu Charishnu Bhumnaha. Adyo Vatara Purusha Parasya. Kala Swabhava Sarasanmanascha. Dravyang Vikaro Guna Indriyani. Virat Swarat Sthasnu Charishnu Bhumnaha. Adyo Vatara Purusha Parasya. Kala Swabhava Sarasanmanascha. Dravyang Vikaro Guna Indriyani. Virat Swarat Sthasnu Charishnu Bhumnaha. Adyo Vatara Purusha Parasya. Swabhava Sarasanmanascha. Dravyam Vikaro Guna Indriyani. Virat Swarat Sthasnu. Virat Swarat Sthasnu Charishnu Bhumnaha. Adyo Viratna Purusha Parasya. Kala Swabhava Sarasanmanascha. Dravyang Vikaro Guna Indriyani. Virat Swarat Sthasnu Charishnu Bhumnaha. Vatara Purusha Parasya. Kala Swabhava Sarasanmanascha. Dravyang Vikaro Guna Indriyani. Virat Swarat Sthasnu Charishnu Bhumnaha. Adyaha. First. Avataraha. Incarnation. Purushaha. Kāranārnavaśayī Visnu. Parasya. Of the Lord. Kalaha. Time. Swabhavaha. Space. Sat, result. Asat, cause. Manaha, mind. Cha, also. Dravyam, elements. Vikaraha, material ego. Gunaha, modes of nature. Indriyani, senses. Virat, the complete whole body. Swarat, Garbhodakashai Vishnu. Sthasnu, immovable. Charishnu, movable. Bhumnaha, of the Supreme Lord. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu is the first incarnation of the Supreme Lord, and He is the master of eternal time, space, cause and effects, mind, the elements, the material ego, the modes of nature, the senses, the universal form of the Lord, Garbhodakashayī Vishnu, and the sum total of all living beings, both moving and non-moving. Purport. That the material creation is not permanent has been discussed many times herein before. The material creation is but a temporary exhibition of the material energy of the Almighty God. This material manifestation is necessary to give a chance to the conditioned souls who are unwilling to associate with the Lord in the relationship of loving transcendental service. Such unwilling conditioned souls are not allowed to enter into the liberated life of spiritual existence because at heart they are not willing to serve. Instead, they want to enjoy themselves as imitation gods. The living entities are constitutionally eternal servitors of the Lord, but some of them, because of misusing their independence, do not wish to serve. Therefore, they are allowed to enjoy the material nature, which is called Maya or illusion. It is called illusion because the living beings under the clutches of Maya are not factually enjoyers, although they think that they are, being illusioned by Maya. Such illusion living entities are given a chance at intervals to rectify their perverted mentality of becoming false masters of the material nature, and they are imparted lessons from the Vedas about their eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord Krishna. Vedaishcha sarver ahameva vedyaha. So, the temporary creation of the material manifestation is an exhibition of the material energy of the Lord, and to manage the whole show, the Supreme Lord incarnates himself as the Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu, just as a magistrate is deputed by the government to manage affairs temporarily. This Kāranādakashayī Vishnu causes the manifestation of the material creation by looking over his material energy, sa aikshata. In the first canto of this book, we have already discussed this manifestation to some extent in the explanation of the verse beginning, Jagrihe Paurushang Rupam, Bhagavatam 131. The duration of the illusory play of material creation is called a kalpa, and we have already discussed the creations taking place in kalpa after kalpa. By the potent activities of Kāranādakashayī Vishnu, the complete ingredients of creation, namely time, space, cause, result, mind, the gross and subtle elements and their interactional modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, and then the senses and their reservoir source, the gigantic universal form, the second incarnation, Garbhodakashayī Vishnu, and all living beings, both moving and standing, which come out of the second incarnation, all became manifested. Ultimately, all these creative elements and the creation itself are but manifestations of the Supreme Lord's potencies. Nothing is independent of the control of the Supreme Being. The first incarnation in the material creation, namely Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu, who is the plenary part of the original personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, is described in the Brahma Samhita 548 as follows. Yasyaika nishvasita kalam athavalambya jivanti loma vilaja jagarandanatha Vishnur mahansa iha yasya kala vishesho govindam adi purushang tamahang bhajami. All the innumerable universes are maintained only during the breathing period of Mahavishnu or Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu, who is only a plenary part of Govinda, the original personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Om ajnanatimirandhasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurun militam yena tasmai Shri Gurave namaha. Shri Chaitanya manobhishthang sthapitang yena bhutale swayam rupa kada mahyam dadati svapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Atapparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitangscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Okay. Namo Vishnu Padaya. Okay. Adyo Vatara Purusha Parasya Kala Swabhava Sarasanmanascha Dravyam Vikaro Guna Indriyani Virat Swarat Sthasnu Charishnu Bhumnaha. Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu is the first incarnation of the Supreme Lord, and he is the master of eternal time, space, cause and effects, mind, the elements, the material ego, the modes of nature, the senses, the universal form of the Lord, Garbhodakashayī Vishnu, and the sum total of all living beings, both moving and non-moving. So, this verse is another verse describing the quality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Purusha, which is described in the Purusha Sukta, which is being explained in this chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. As Vishnu Chitta Prabhu was explaining yesterday, the Purusha Sukta is a prayer, a Vedic prayer, which is ultimately describing the Supreme Lord in his personal feature, specifically as being the creator, maintainer, and destroyer of the cosmic manifestation. Of course, you can go a little bit deeper into that, but generally, for all intents and purposes, the definition of God for everybody in the material world is he who is creating, maintaining, and destroying the material world that we're living in. And that's about as far as we understand God according to our own interpretation. And in so many other religions, this is about as far as anyone goes in understanding God. But specifically in the Srimad Bhagavatam and in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, this is just the very beginning of the philosophical understanding of who is the personality of Godhead, Krishna. Not only do we have different names of Krishna, we also have different descriptions of his pastimes and his forms and his qualities and his companions, and so many different things are there in the Vedic literatures which most people don't have access to. So we're very fortunate to hear descriptions of the Supreme Lord and how he's acting in this way. Specifically, we're very fortunate to understand who Krishna is as a person and how he's acting in a personal way in this material world. Understanding how God is personally acting in this material world and how he's personally connected with us, it ultimately gives us inspiration in our spiritual life, because this relationship that we can develop with him is something which is ever fresh and ever tasteful, and it can inspire us in so many different ways. And that's simply because of the sublime nature of Krishna. All of his qualities are very sublime. And of course, one of the other names of God is called Bhagavan. And Bhagavan is one who has all opulences. And Prabhupada describes that there's 6 categories of opulences, and everyone in the material world may have some of these opulences to some extent. One might be the richest man in the world, or the strongest man in the world, or the most renounced, or anything like that. But there's no one in the material world that has all of these things simultaneously. And Krishna he's the most wealthy, he's the most famous, he's the most intelligent, he's the strongest, he's the most renounced, and he is, what's the 6th one? I missed one. He's very beautiful. Yeah, so Lord Krishna is, and actually all different avatars of Krishna exhibit all of these opulences to the fullest extent. Some of them, one opulence or a few of the opulences are more apparent than others, but specifically in the form of Govinda, the original personality of Godhead Krishna, and also it's described by previous acharyas that Lord Rama and also Nrsimha Bhagavan are specific forms of Krishna where we can see the opulences and the opulences of God to the topmost extent. And that doesn't mean that in any other manifestations of God these are not present, but in some different manifestations we see more of some qualities than others. And specifically in the Purusha avatars of Krishna, which are described in this purport, the Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu, Garbhodakashayī Vishnu, and Kshirodakashayī Vishnu, these are also Bhagavan, these are also non-different from Krishna, but because they are Prabhupada explains that they are kind of deputed to perform a certain task in the creation, maintenance, and destruction of this material world. Because of that, we see different manifestations of those opulences. And specifically for the creator, maintainer, and destroyer of the material world, there is a strong emphasis on the Aishwarya, or the opulence, the power, the majesty of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is the mood of the Purusha Sukta, which we are explaining in this chapter. So, so first of all, we see here there's a name of Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu, which is rarely seen in Prabhupada's books. In this specific translation and purport, Prabhupada has decided to call him Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu, which is the exact same meaning. So you have Kāranārnavaśayī, which means Kārana Udaka means the water of the causal ocean, the water of the spiritual water existing outside of all material universes. And then Shayi is one who lays down, like Shayana is to lay down. So one who lies in the causal ocean. Same thing with Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu, Karana, and then Arnav. There's a boy that comes, an Indian boy that comes, his name is Arnav. And that means ocean or water, something like that. So it's the same exact meaning. There's also different names. Mahavishnu is another name for Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu. Here in the purport we have Adya Avatara, which means the first avatar, which is also Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu. You have Karanodaka Swami, I've also seen in Prabhupada's books. So there's for every single form of Lord Krishna, there's many different names which attribute the qualities of that form. And and if you look at the etymological descriptions of Krishna and the different names, if we try to understand the different names, it actually reveals these very wonderful qualities of Lord Krishna. And specifically, these names are directly describing how God is lying in the causal ocean and he's manifesting the material world like that. So just from the very name itself, this is a very personal name. And from the descriptions of Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu, specifically Prabhupada is quoting from the Brahma Samhita in this purport, then we see that it is a personal form and there's no argument against that. We're hearing of all of the different universes emanating from the bodily pores from his transcendental body. And if you have pores, that means you have a body. And if you have a body, it means you have limbs. And your different limbs, they perform different activities. And it's just like us. Just like in biblical Abrahamic traditions, we hear that God created man in the form of God. So similarly, this form of Krishna is a personal form of Krishna who has a transcendental body. So in many ways, his body is like our body, but our body is a perverted reflection of his body, and it is made of matter, and whereas his body is completely made of spirit. So there is a philosophical problem that we run into whenever we try to understand how a fully transcendent personality can manifest material worlds. How can a fully spiritual source create material reactions or effects? And as Jayadvaita Maharaj was speaking previously, I think there was a question in this regard that the Vedas and specifically the Hare Krishnas and everything like this, we don't have a monopoly on trying to philosophically understand how God, the transcendent Lord, is actually overseeing the material nature. That many different theologians, whether they be in the Abrahamic tradition or in the Vedic tradition, this is a big problem. This is a big question that many people have. And in Prabhupada's books, it's very clearly explained. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's very clearly explained time and time again. And if you look up Purusha Avatar or Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu or something like this, then we see Prabhupada giving so many times the descriptions of actually this process of how God is creating, maintaining, and destroying this material world. So specifically for the Adi avatar, Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu, we are dealing with the creation of the material worlds. And this is different from the description that we hear in the Bible in some sense, where in the beginning there was one word and that word was God. And then that God said, "Let there be light." And then he said, "Let there be earth," or I don't remember the order, the sequence of events, but there was 6 days where he said, "Let there be this, let there be that," and then on the 7th day he was tired, so he decided to take rest. And that is not the exact description that we get here. Although, we do understand that in the beginning there was as far as the material world is, speaking about the material world, there was nothing. There was nothing in existence. But the Srimad Bhagavatam and all of Prabhupada's books describe that whether or not the material world is existing, whether it's manifest or unmanifest, there's always a spiritual nature which is eternally existing, which there are unlimited activities and qualities and forms and everything that is eternally going on in the spiritual nature. This is not something that we hear from any other religious texts or different philosophies or doctrines. And so this is something very, very special, and this is actually, it can help us understand how God is separate from this material world, although He is also overseeing it. And Prabhupada says that He's overseeing this just like a magistrate is deputed by the government to manage affairs temporarily. So this material world is temporary, and it is of the inferior material nature of Krishna, but that doesn't mean that the controller of this material world is inferior. The controller of this material world is of the same quality as Krishna, being completely free from any touch of Maya, any contamination, and being completely free from any desire to enjoy the material nature, which it diametrically contradicts the mentality of the living entities who are in this world. So just from the descriptions that we can hear in these books, we can understand that this is a completely different personality. This is the nature of this person is completely different than the conditioned souls in the material world. Nonetheless, he is managing all affairs in this material world. And in the conclusion of the purport, it says, all the innumerable universes are maintained only during the breathing period of Mahavishnu, Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu, who is only a plenary part of Govinda, the original personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Oh, wait. I thought there was one line. Basically, somewhere in here, Prabhupada says that everything going on in the material world is only going on according to the allowance of the Supreme Lord, Krishna, or Vishnu. And this word Vishnu is also a description of what is God, and the word Vishnu indicates one who is omnipotent, one who is omnipresent, and one who is omniscient. So one who is fully powerful, who has all potency, one who is omniscient, one who is fully all-pervading, he is everywhere, all at once, and one who is all-knowing, omniscient. What was the other one? Omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent. So these are the qualities of Vishnu. And this Vishnu, although he is directly engaged in overseeing the activities of the material world, there's never any point where he develops any attachment for enjoying the material energy, nor is he ever bound by the actions and reactions of the material energy. And this is described in the Bhagavad Gita, which is oftentimes described as the ABCs of spiritual knowledge. We tell this to people, and the Srimad Bhagavatam is like the postgraduate study of this. So before we even try to understand Lord Krishna and his different avatars, like Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, and all these things, and especially in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, where we hear of Govinda in his original form as a cowherd boy in Vrindavan and performing pastimes like this, it's important to understand that the person that we are dealing with is God. And this is the subject matter of the Bhagavad Gita, and this is also the subject matter of the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna very clearly explains to Arjuna that previously in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes it very clear that actually, Arjuna, you are of the same quality as I am. You're actually of the spiritual quality, and you're in Maya right now, but you need to get out of Maya, basically. And he explains that we are of the same quality, but later on, Krishna begins to reveal more and more, all the way up until where he's exhibiting his universal form, that he is of a completely different caliber on this spiritual level. So in the 9th chapter, Krishna explains how he is overseeing this material world in a few verses. Maya tatamidang sarvam. Okay, where are we? Maya tatamidang sarvam jagara vyaktamurtina matstani sarvabhutani nachaham teshvavastitaha. So by me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. So this is where you can start to get really confused about the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. All living beings are in me, but I am not in them. And just yesterday, there was a guy at the Indian store who, he was a Mayavadi. He didn't want to give a donation to the temple because he says he's already giving to so many different things, and everything is God. Everyone is God. God is everywhere, and everything like that. And he said, actually, God is in everyone's heart. But I told him, but you're not in everyone's heart. How are you God? You're not in everyone's heart. So it's very easy to understand that God is in everyone's heart, but we are not in everyone's heart. Everyone is existing. In the 7th chapter, we hear Krishna explaining that everything and everyone is existing like pearls which are strung on a thread. And if you look at like a string of pearls, it looks like there's just pearls. You don't actually see that there's a thread behind it, but just logically you understand that there's a thread whenever you see a string of pearls and they're being maintained like that. You just understand that there's a thread. So similarly, we might not see very apparently how Krishna is maintaining this cosmic universe, but he is existing there, and through logical reasoning we can understand, and of course by the help of by Srila Prabhupada, and of course Krishna explaining these things in the Bhagavad Gita. So nachamatstani bhutani pashyame yogamaishwaram bhuta brinnacha bhuta stomamatma bhuta bhavanaha. And yet everything that is created does not rest in me. Behold my mystic opulence. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, and although I am everywhere, I am not a part of this cosmic manifestation, for myself is the very source of creation. So Krishna is the source of this cosmic manifestation, meaning that he cannot be a product of that. This is a product of him. He cannot be a product of the material world. And in this way, he's describing how he is completely detached from the material energy. And ultimately, every single living entity who is being under the influence of the material energy is not of this same nature. And this is, of course, this is a temporary covering which is over the conditioned soul. And he gives a very good one of the most amazing things that really stood out to me when I first started reading Prabhupada's books is that he gives so many very expert analogies to explain the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And sometimes he says that in order to fully understand the nature of the absolute truth, you first have to understand how things are working in this material world. And this is just because we are completely conditioned by our material senses. Our only conception of anything around us is by our sense perception, and so to understand the nature of Krishna by the analogies of material things is a very good way how a conditioned soul can actually come to the platform of understanding Krishna. And Krishna himself uses this same technique of giving these types of analogies. So he says that understand that as the mighty wind blowing everywhere rests always in the sky, all created beings live in me. So just how this is another thing which is confusing for people who haven't read Prabhupada's books. There's a difference between sky and air. And sky can also be called like space. Most people understand it as space. So there's space existing like in everything in the matter, and there's like a space there. But the wind is blowing in the space. It's not that the wind is the space that's moving. The space is something that is stationary, and then the wind is something that is moving through the space. So similarly, Krishna is compared to the space, and then the cosmic manifestation is like the wind. So they're two separate things, although through sense perception you can't exactly notice the difference between the two things. By logical reasoning and understanding like that, you can see the distinction. And then is explained the kalpa, which Prabhupada later explains in this purport. But the point is that we must understand very clearly that this Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu is not an inferior form of Krishna who is in touch with the material energy. There's never any point where Krishna ever comes into contact with the material energy. Krishna in his original form as Govinda has nothing to do whatsoever with the material world at all. He deputes his different expansions and incarnations to deal with the material nature. And then out of his mercy, he appears in this material world to our vision in order to attract us to his pastimes in the spiritual world. But at never any time do we hear of Shyamasundara Krishna engaged in creating, maintaining, and destroying material universes. He does this through his expansions, and of course we have the Chatur Vyuha expansions, and of the 4 different expansions of the original personality of Godhead, we have Sankarshan, who is not different from Baladev, and from Baladev, he is expanding into these different Purusha avatars. And but never at any point should we think that these expansions are inferior to Krishna. There's another verse in the Brahma Samhita, Dipar chireva hi dashantaram abhyupeta dipayate vivrita hetu samana dharma yastadrig eva hicha vishnu taya vibhati govindamari purushang tamahang bhajami, which basically explains that although there may be one candle, which is the original candle, you can light unlimited other candles with that same original candle, and all of these different candles have the same brightness, the same quality of heat, of light, and they have the same potency, actually. They have the same power. All of them can have the same power from that, but there's still a distinction from that original candle. And that is Krishna, that is Govinda. He is the original candle, and that therefore we call him the original and supreme personality of Godhead. But all of his expansions and manifestations and incarnations, they hold that same potency. That's not something that is lost whenever Krishna expands. And this is explained in the invocation to the Ishopanishad. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnamevavashishyate. That the supreme absolute truth, Krishna, is perfect and complete, and all of his emanations are also complete and perfect. They're never, and actually all of his different parts and parcels are also complete and perfect. And never at any time, from no matter how much you subtract from Krishna, he still remains one. Whereas in the material world, if you have 1 and you do -1, it equals 0. If you have 2 and -1, it equals 0. But Prabhupada says in the spiritual world, 2 minus 1 equals 1, or 1 minus 1 equals 1. So this is the nature of Krishna. You can't diminish anything from him. You can't take anything away from Krishna. So the Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu and all the different incarnations and avatars of Krishna, they all have that same potency as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because they are the Supreme Personality of Godhead in different manifestations. And of course, he's performing different activities for the creation of the material world, but that doesn't mean that he has to do anything. It doesn't mean that he actually has to do anything. And this is also explained later, just a few more verses later in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Nachamang tani karmani nibandhanti dhananjaya udasina varasinam asaktam teshu karmasu. Oh Dhananjaya, all this work cannot bind me. I am ever detached from all these material activities, seated as though neutral. So at every point in time, Krishna is neutral. Although it seems like he is attached to performing different activities, he's completely renounced from it. This is one of the qualities of Bhagavan, which we were explaining earlier, that he is full of renunciation. And never at any time does he actually feel like the need to perform mundane activity. He never performs any mundane activity whatsoever. But specifically with the manifestation of the material cosmos, it's not that he does this in order to enjoy or in order to enjoy that material nature. And Prabhupada actually explains that it is not Krishna who wants to create this material world, who wants to create Maya and everything like this. It's not him that wants this, it's actually the jivas that want this. Because of their reluctance to serve and their reluctance to have a loving relationship with Krishna, then Krishna feels obliged to give them a place to go and be imitation gods, as we're hearing here. So similarly, in a government here in America, for instance, it's not that we want to have prisons. It's not that we want to have a corrective. What do they call this? The correctional facility, or the entire police force in general. It's not that we want to have this. There's so much money and time and energy that's gone into this, and a lot of it gets wasted, and it's just a huge ordeal. And nowadays, there's so much controversy of all the money, and now there's like private prisons and everything like that. So it's a really big deal. And if we could avoid doing this, then it would be for the benefit of society. It seems that way. If we didn't have to deal with all of this, everybody could be free to do what they want. It would be easier. But that's not how it works. For the maintenance of the government in mass, and for the welfare of all the citizens, there has to be a separate facility for those who are not willing to follow the rules. So this material world is that. It's compared to be a prison. It's also compared to be like a hospital where we can come and be corrected like that. But it is a correctional facility. And in a correctional facility, there are people who are in the facility, but they are not being subjected by the laws of the facility. There are workers in the prison, but they are not in prison like the prisoners are in prison. You have the wardens and the different officers and things like that are working there. And although in the material world, a lot of these are also very criminal types of people, very corrupt people who are working in there. And as far as the material world is going, Krishna, he not only personally expands himself in different avatars to oversee this prison, this material prison, but he also deputes his different devotees to oversee the different activities that are going on there. So this is the demigods. So you have the Purusha avatars who are non-different from Krishna, and then you also have the demigods, starting with Lord Brahma, who sprouts from the lotus growing from the stem of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, who is the next expansion of Kāranārnavaśayī Vishnu. So in this way, there are rulers of this cosmic world that we're subject to the forces of, and all of these, while we are incarcerated in this material prison, we're undergoing so much struggle and suffering and things like this. In prisons, at least like back in the day, there's like, you hear so many different stories of like torture, and I think even like nowadays we have this place over I don't remember. There's like this one prison that America has where they Alcatraz was there, but we still have a place where we get like prisoners of war. What is it? Guantanamo Bay, yeah. So they get like prisoners of war, and these people, because they're not American citizens, it's like we can do whatever we want to them, basically. And there's like so many different exposés of like the United States government who are like torturing different prisoners of war to get information from them and things like this. So there's so much struggle that is going on in these prison systems. Even internally, there's so much fighting. So similarly, here in this material world, we undergo three basic types of suffering. And then you have the Adi Bautika Klesha, Adi Daivika Klesha, and Adhyatmika Klesha. So Adhyatmika is like, so in the prison, one of the heaviest punishments that you can get in the prison is solitary confinement, right? So it's like, if you really act out, they completely take you away from everybody, and they put you in like a room with no windows, and they're just padding on the walls, and you're just there with your mind, and you just have to sit there and like suffer like that. And that's actually one of the highest levels of punishment in the prison system. So that is like compared to the Adhyatmika Klesha, where just existing with our own mind is so much suffering in this material world. And then you have the Adi Bautika Klesha, where all the other living entities in this material world are giving each other a hard time. We can understand just like a mosquito, he might not even know what he's doing, but he's just so obnoxiously like, biting us and getting in our eyes and things like this. Just this tiny little bug can cause so much suffering to somebody, and it can even cause diseases like malaria and everything. But and then you have Adi Daivika Klesha, which are inflicted by the demigods, and the demigods are overseeing the different activities of like the weather and all of these different things, the natural disasters and things like this. They're always happening. So that's kind of like when the wardens are like beating the prisoners and stuff like that. So, and it's because they deserve it. In a correctional facility which is being run properly according to principles and laws, and everyone's abiding and everyone's following the rules and everything like that, these things are there, and these things are sanctioned by the laws. There's laws in place, there's rules in place which sanction the punishment of the prisoners. And it's not because they get enjoyment out of punishing the prisoners, but it's a necessary thing, because this is the prison isn't a place that's supposed to be a permanent residence for criminals. This is supposed to be a correctional facility. Of course, you have people who commit such horrible crimes that they are forced to stay in prison for the rest of their life. But for the most part, this is supposed to be a place where one can correct their behavior, one can ultimately reinstate themselves as a citizen who can exist outside in the regular world. So similarly, although we're undergoing so many things, so many different distresses and sufferings in this material world, we can have hope that this is something which is temporary, and that if we accept our situation where we're at right now, and if we make the best of a bad bargain, and we try to apply ourselves to the process that is being deputed by the magistrates of this material world, then there's hope for us to one day come out of here. And this isn't such a big deal for people who don't understand the eternal nature of the soul. But for someone who understands reincarnation and understands the transmigration of the soul, this is a very big deal. And especially understanding that this isn't our only life. We've been here time and time again. Even this Kāranārnavaśayī Visnu, kalpa after kalpa, he's exhaling and creating so many material worlds, and then inhaling and then annihilating all of them. That's going on, and I think in just one breath, it's something I don't remember the number. Trillions and trillions of years, hundreds of trillions of years, I think, and 311 trillion years, just in one breath of Mahavishnu. And we have to think that we have been in this material world for hundreds, thousands, millions, trillions of just one of these kalpas. It really, one should develop some urgency to get out of here while we can. Now that we have an opportunity and we can grab a hold of it and really apply ourselves to it, if you just let it slip through your fingers, it's very, very unfortunate. And specifically in this human form of life, we have the greatest opportunity to apply ourselves to this Krishna consciousness movement, which is being so mercifully preached by the devotees of Lord Chaitanya all around the world now. So it's a very rare opportunity, and one shouldn't live this life as a human being and do anything other than this activity. It's just like in the prison. If you want to get out of prison, you shouldn't engage in more crimes while you're in the prison. This is one of the biggest things which get people to stay in prison for a long time, is that while they're in prison, they commit more offenses. They kill somebody in prison, they get in fights, they steal stuff, they smuggle drugs in there or something like that. So this is completely foolish. The whole point of going to prison is so that you have some time where you can sit down and think, and you can try to correct yourself. You can apply yourself to the process there, and they offer different classes, and they engage you in different services where you might even get some kind of payment. And I think they still make the license plates in Georgia, and there's different things that you can apply yourself into. And then after some time, it might take some time, and it might take a full sentence. But even if you are applying yourself so firmly to the process of that is being given to you in a prison, there's this thing where you get out early, the early release, because of good behavior. And so similarly, if we fully apply ourselves to this Krishna consciousness movement, even though like in a regular situation, in a different yuga or something like this, the liberation of the conditioned soul is something that would take many, many lifetimes, and it would take one pointed focus, and you can't fall down. There's very, very strict principles that you have to follow in the yoga system and in temple worship and things like this. All these different things are there, but specifically in Lord Chaitanya's, by his mercy, we can get an early release from this cycle, this samsara that we've been going through for so long. So we should take advantage of this. It's a very serious thing. We shouldn't be whimsically involved in this movement just for the sake of another thing to do. And there's so many different things to do in this material world, and ultimately everything that we do other than Krishna consciousness is just we're just trying to imitate God. And if you really want to imitate God, then try to lie down in a spiritual water and try to breathe out pores from your pores, all the material universe. You just can't do it. You can't do it. Ethan was telling me the other day that it was even though he had some kind of Mayavadi sentiments and stuff like that, at the same time he never really believed that he was fully God, because he was thinking, there's, even on a material level, there's people who are higher than me, there's people who are more powerful, more beautiful, things like this. So this is something that is intelligent, to come to terms with the situation that we're in, to make the best deal out of a bad bargain, and fully apply ourselves to the process of Krishna consciousness. And in this way, by performing service and all at the same time, by hearing and chanting the wonderful pastimes, qualities, forms of Krishna, then we can get an early release from this prison of the material world. So it's a very fortunate thing. By reading Bhagavatam, this is just the beginning of how much nectar you can dive into the qualities of Krishna. This is just the very beginning of Krishna's opulences. Here in the material world, if you're if you're super wealthy or something like that, it's like such a big thing. To think of God as being the creator of one universe, what to speak of unlimited universes, is such a big thing. We can't even comprehend it. But what to speak of Krishna's activities and all of his different avatars and his sweet pastimes in Vrindavan, all of these things are just on a completely different level. And so this is what we have access to in the Srimad Bhagavatam. By hearing about this, by speaking about it with devotees and always trying to remember these things, then we can ultimately be purified. We can correct our criminal mentality. So yeah, always remember Krishna. Who was it? Oh, Nali was telling me last night that at the Guyanese temple, and also Vishnu was speaking about it yesterday. The Guyanese temples, they have like all the demigods stacked on top of everybody, and they call it all Bhagavan. And then they tell them at the Guyanese temple, everybody just sit and take a deep breath and remember your favorite form of Bhagavan. And I don't even want to try to imagine what is going through like most of like their heads. Probably a bunch of like nonsense. But if we can hear about Bhagavan, Krishna, and his different forms like this, and we can develop some attraction to serving Krishna and to developing a relationship with him in a loving way, this is for our ultimate benefit. So the more we hear about it, the more we distribute these books and tell other people about it, the more we chant about this, and the book distribution is non-different from the chanting about it, kirtan, and preaching, then we can ultimately become purified and we can get out of this mess that we've gotten ourselves into. So I'll finish there. If anybody has any questions, comments.
Well, I wanted to ask Maharaj, Jayadvaita Maharaj, about this. That he said, let's not get too proud there. When Vishnu Prabhu asked him that question, but whatever the other religions may know, other theologians or whatever they may know about the modes of material nature or whatever, they don't. Do they know it? Like, it's just a speculation, right? In the Bible, there's no way. Is there like descriptions of the modes of material nature or anything even close to it in the Bible?
I haven't done such a study. I mean, one thing to understand is that you have the general mass of Christians that you see who are just like complete nonsense people, but you also have like serious scholars, theologians who really know their stuff. And from what I've heard, I've never met one because they're so rare, but from what I've seen on like YouTube and stuff like this, even devotees have a hard time arguing with some of these people because they're so philosophically inclined. And for even Christianity, it hasn't been existing clearly as long as like the Vedic religion, for lack of a better word. But even to be existing for 2,000 years, there has to be some kind of philosophical backing to it. And previously, especially like in the Catholic Church, there were saints who were like, they would only study the scripture. They must have had some understanding of how God is at least transcendent to the material world. Right, which I think that's what he was saying.
From what I've heard, it seems like they've borrowed a lot from Plato and Aristotle and all that, and that's the philosophical thing that's added. So I'm just curious. I mean, like I was thinking maybe you would know, because as far as they don't even understand you're not this body. They most of them I've met out of the conception that your body is spiritual and this body is what you'll be having in heaven, which is really nice.
The last 3 chapters of this book, Quest for Enlightenment, it's probably the same things that are from the Beyond Illusion and Doubt and the dialectic spiritualism, but there's 3 conversations with Prabhupada where he's discussing about like these European philosophers, and it was interesting because when I was reading that, there was this one French guy who like literally, well, actually all three of them, they revolutionized the whole theology of Christianity by mental speculation. They come up with a theory and then they presented it, and then the Christians adopted this as their theology. And it's not something that they found in their scriptures, it's something that this philosopher like came up with. And, you know, so yeah, that's there. I think like more like what like Maharaj was like saying is that philosophers and theologians, this is a question that they at least ask and they think about. But as far as being explained in like the Bible, I've never seen anything like that. At least it's not very clear. Nothing in the Bible is very clear. There's all sorts of allegories and like, you know, it's up to interpretation for everybody.
You've read it, right? You read.
Yeah, I read the whole Bible, but it didn't really do anything for me.
Okay, I mean clearly, but
I remember my grandmother, she's a fanatical Baptist, and
I met her.
She when I was young, I was probably like 8 years old or something. She told me she'd give me $100 if I memorized all the books of the Bible. So I think I did it like that day, and I came and like recited all the books of the Bible to her. But I don't know any. I know a few of them now. I don't know anything.
So just an offshoot question. In the whole idea of Satan and all that, is it in the Bible or is it coming from another philosophy?
Yeah, it's there, but as far Prabhupada gave a lot of he gave a lot of respect to people who are following the real teachings of the Bible, and he never called out any teachings from the Bible. He called out people for not following the teachings of the Bible. So I'm sure if you study the Bible, so Satan is supposed to be Lucifer, who was an angel, who was a servant of God, and then he fell down, and then he became a very powerful demon who oversees the hell. And as far as people understanding hell to be an eternal thing, I don't think you can find that in the Bible. I've never heard any scriptural evidence of that. And if it is there, then we would understand that the Bible is saying something which is completely incorrect. Prabhupada never really like said that. Prabhupada, he did say it is a bona fide scripture to some extent, although it is tamasic.
And also there was some research that was done, and there's actually reincarnation was present in the Bible, and then people decided to take it out.
Right.
And there was another theologian who was saying that there's as many versions of the Bible as there's words in the Bible, or letters in the Bible, which is crazy. And another thing, I remember being with Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, and I think he was either getting a massage or, actually we was talking to Brigupati Prabhu, myself and him, and he told that, until, he went to Thailand, he'd never really had much appreciation for the Bible or anything like that because, he was born a Catholic, he read it, and it didn't really do much for him. Then when he went to Thailand and he saw that there's not even a conception of God, there's not even a word for God. There's not even a word for God. And because there's not even a word for God, people cannot even start to accept anything close to like Krishna consciousness. They have to say like the high emperor in the sky, or they have to come up with some kind of a concept for people to understand. And they're known as laughing Thais. They're always smiling and having a good time. But the minute you start mentioning something about God, they get very angry. And then he said actually his appreciation for the Bible and the Quran and all these other scriptures, although they're called Yavan scriptures in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, it increased a lot, because it helped increase, because he's seeing that there's so many people who actually believe in God and accept the whole concept of it. So I'm just like, balancing what Jayadvaita Maharaj is saying. Definitely something must be there. Otherwise, how is it that so many people believe in God, Anyway.
Yes, there's a lot of people like in America, they really, really respect Christianity and the Bible, and they really respect like scriptures and stuff like that. And I forget who it was. I think Rishi Kumar Prabhu was telling me that there's one devotee, whenever he goes to sneak into somewhere, if they start asking him too much, like too many questions about the books that he's bringing in or something like that, he'll tell them that they're Bibles, and he says it works really, really good to like sneak into places because people are like, oh, it's Bibles? Like, thank you. Like, yeah, come, you can give them out, no problem. If you try to explain what you're actually giving out, then they'll start asking more questions. But you just tell them it's a Bible and it's fine, Sometimes people, like crazy people, come out and be like, what is this, a Bible? And just to avoid like dealing with them and avoid like arousing any kind of anger or something, you just be like, yeah, pretty much, yeah, sure. People still have we're in the belt buckle of the Bible belt. So.
I didn't know anything about Bible, anything. But hearing more Prabhupada's room conversations and interviews and mostly room conversations and morning walks. many a times Prabhupada, this prayer of Christians, Our Father, art of heaven, hallowed be thy name. Prabhupada many times brings up these things, and he gives, I think while conversation, even their disciples, who are there around, they used to compliment Prabhupada that you're giving a great interpretation of what Bible says within the lines.
Yeah.
So many times, Prabhupada, he brings out many biblical, if you hear room conversations and specifically morning walks, if you see, Prabhupada brings out what is there, God went to rest these 6 days. That rest indicates Kāranārnavaśayī Visnu, Prabhupada says that. So what my point is that, although from India we don't know about Christianity, but many things as Prabhupada said, as you sow, so shall you reap. I don't know whether it is, Prabhupada said, I don't know whether it is there in somewhere, it's there in Bible.
Yeah, it's Bible.
But so it indicates karma. Prabhupada said that. So karmic relaxation.
Yeah,
Of course, Prabhupada
when you
didn't say
talk to
3 modes of
Christian-
nature as Prabhu was asking about. But my point is that I heard from Maharaj, there is a quote, something in the Bible which says that the granules of God grind slowly but finitely, something is there, which indicates time, karma, and the karmic reaction.
Yeah.
And this shloka, I didn't know, but when I was reading Prabhupada, aprarabdha phalam papam kutam bijam phalonmukham, it indicates that. You have the kuta, you have a bija, you have the propensity, and it turns into a seed, and then prarabdha. So the point is that those who want to read even Bible also scrutinize, if they read Prabhupada's book, they will understand Bible also very nicely. As Maharaj said in one lecture, that even other sampradayas, if they want to read their Acharya's book, like Ramanujacharya's books or Vallabhacharya's books, if they read Prabhupada's books, they will definitely understand their Acharya's interpretation more nicely. So Prabhupada's books also, if you read Bible now, immediately you will also understand, and you can refute them because you know what is the highest way. Of course, means, I mean to say, you read Prabhupada's books. So by reading Prabhupada's books, you can defeat anybody. Even Saint Paul comes, we can defeat him.
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing is that whenever I'm engaged in, usually it's some kind of argument with like a Christian or something like that, it's hardly ever like a philosophical like debate or anything like that. But if you really start pressing them about things like karma and stuff like that, they might say like, I don't believe in karma, and then you ask them, okay, what do you think karma is, or something like that, and they'll try to say something about reincarnation or something like that usually. But if you start like pressing these things like as you sow, so you shall reap and stuff like that, they understand these things, the action and reaction and things like this. And especially the Christians, their whole thing is that if you do good, then you go to heaven, and if you do bad, then you go to hell. And they understand this. This is like a very basic thing. So they don't like to call it karma. They don't like to use our terminology for it, but they understand some of these like ideas, at least to some level, So that's one thing that in Prabhupada's books was really attractive to me early on, is that he even in his earliest editions of the Bhagavad Gita, he was using terminology which was very familiar to Christians. I think in the original, in his original Bhagavad Gita, he would say the Blessed Lord and
Actually, that
things
is
like
the Haigriva's translation.
Yeah, and I'm
Prabhupada
sure.
didn't want like that.
I'm sure.
But
I'm
it is
sure.
Haigriva's way of explaining things. Haigriva wanted the Blessed Lord. It's like the
It
Christian
was
way
approved by
people understand
Prabhupada,
it.
and also in some of Prabhupada's writings, even in his poem that he wrote for his Guru Maharaj, it's something that looks like a Christian thing. Yeah, evangelic angel. It's like there's Christian terminology that he uses, and it's very attractive for people who aren't directly attracted to the terminology of Bhagavatam and things like this. So Prabhupada in this way did tremendous bridge preaching, and I was telling Ethan yesterday, one of the biggest things that I really liked about Prabhupada's books early on is that it just kind of clicked with me because I was already like considered myself a Christian to some extent, and I had a lot of appreciation for Christianity, but I didn't know anything about like Hinduism. I was learning about Hinduism, but it was something so foreign to me that it was hard to relate to. But Prabhupada really helps to relate to everybody, even like Muslims, which is very similar to like Christianity, but the terminology is important. There was another thing, but I forget what I was going to say. Anyways, nickel bag.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, you mentioned in your class that the different incarnations of Vishnu, they have different functions when they come in when they deputed to oversee the material world. And the translation is saying that Mahavishnu, he's the master of the mind. And I remember reading in the 3rd canto and also the 4th canto that Anirudra, he's also the master of the mind. So is it that all the incarnations, they have some type of control or the master of the
Well,
mind, although they have different specific functions?
There's descriptions in different parts of the Bhagavatam, but even some of these things are also said to be different demigods are in charge of the mind, or different demigods are in charge of the senses and things like this. Ultimately, Chandra Manasa. So Chandra is the master of the mind. Uh-huh. Yeah. So that's there, but the proper understanding is seeing that even through his different representatives, it's ultimately Krishna who's in charge of everything. So there might be different forms of Krishna who are acting in different ways, and there's also demigods who are not Krishna at all, who are also they've been given the power to act in different ways. But ultimately, Krishna is the only one acting. There's this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, the Kartaham iti manyate. What is it? Manani gurnai karmani sarvashaha hankara vimuratma kartaham iti manyate. Right? So it's like diluted by the material false ego. One is thinking that they're acting, but in reality, it's just the 3 modes of material nature acting. What are the 3 modes of material nature? They're the energy of Krishna. How does the material nature act? It doesn't just automatically act. It has to be done by some spirit, and Krishna is the supreme spirit who is causing everything to act. So that's the proper understanding. Even there's so many different things. And also, we were talking about Bhagavan in the beginning. There's also other personalities who are called Bhagavan. There's like Shiva, Narada. There's a few, even in the Bhagavatam. So that's there. Ultimately, Krishna is in charge of the mind and everything. It's not that we pray to Chandra to help us with our mind. We pray to Krishna for everything. Pray to Krishna to help us with everything. So, Ravi Chandra.
Just a comment and a question, kind of to go off what Mahotsa Prabhu was asking about the Bible. Does it talk about the 3 modes of material nature? And I mean, you already said this, but most things in the Bible are like left up to interpretation. But there definitely are verses that discourage one to discouraging one to be in the mode of passion, although it's a tamastic
Right.
shastra or whatever it is. But this is a verse from Romans that says, the mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the spirit is life and peace.
There you go.
So there are certain verses that discourage you to,
The terminology will obviously be different, but it seems like a lot of the ideas are there in a very vague way.
And,
More philosophically inclined people, they find a lot of meaning to like the different shlokas of the Bible and stuff like that. There's very famous shlokas that have like a lot of meaning to them, and a lot of deep meaning to them that people try to like expand on. I remember in my church growing up, they would do the same thing, and they would take one verse from the Bible and they would expand. They would talk about it the whole class, the whole sermon. They would expand on it. It's a similar format.
I was remembering too my early days at New Talavan. They had, I'm not sure who the book belonged to, but they had different kind of older books from like the early days of ISKCON. But there was this nice pamphlet.
Yeah, we have
journal.
one.
It's called "It Says That in the Bible."
Yeah, it says what in the Bible? Nick read this, right?
Yeah.
It says what in the Bible? There's a pamphlet, an old school pamphlet, ISKCON pamphlet that says, the title is, It Says What in the Bible? Yeah, and there's things about like reincarnation and meat eating, and it's pretty cool. When I was first getting into Krishna consciousness, before I told anybody, I told my grandmother that I wanted to be a devotee. And before I went to meet with her, I did a lot of homework, and I researched all the Bible shlokas that I could present to her to try to convince her that it was bona fide, like what I was doing. And there's a lot. There really is a lot.
Did she like it?
Yeah.
I actually had a question too. Towards the end of your class, you were talking about like some people will just like join the movement, like just to be a part of it, kind of thing. But I wanted you to like kind of fluff out that statement. Like, what you meant by
I mean,
that.
of course, when we're coming in the association of devotees, we're contaminated by so many material desires. But if you're not coming into the association of devotees with the desire to get purified from material desires, and you're just coming in as seeing another way to enjoy, I can enjoy in a spiritual way. Like same thing with like when somebody becomes a vegan and they don't have any like religious or philosophical reason of becoming a vegan, they just want to have another identity, another material identity where they can attract the opposite sex or they can have a healthy body or something like that. So this is the same thing. I mean, I've heard cases of people coming into Krishna consciousness because they had a crush on like a devotee and they just wanted to get with like a devotee or something like that. And it is there, like even in like Bhagavatam, akama sarvakama va moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajete purusham param. So like, no matter if you have unlimited desires, no desires, or if you have a desire to get impersonal liberation, you should perform tivra bhakti. You should be, engage in the service. And the idea is that even if somebody comes in with material motives, the devotees engage them in so much devotional service that after some time they get purified from it. So, it doesn't always happen.
You talked about like how there's no verse or whatever like in the Bible that says that hell isn't like eternal, but then there's this one verse that says like eternal damnation. I don't know if that's what they refer to when they talk about
All of these things are there. So there's a lot of things in modern translations of the Bible which really, really support some of their like nonsensical ideas and everything like that. But as far as I've seen in at least different cases, in the original like Hebrew or Greek versions of the Bible, then it can be interpreted completely differently. Like for instance, I don't know what the word is. I remember there was a guy messing with us at Patel Brothers one day, and we were like, actually, the word mangsa, it means meat, and it's a Hebrew word which means like to like murder or something like that. And like, he like believed that like I knew what I was talking about, like I knew the Hebrew word. But there's a thing where there's a Hebrew word, I don't know what the word is, but the meaning of that word, and they also use this argument whenever people try to like call them out for this. It's a word there's a Hebrew word for kill and there's a Hebrew word for murder. And the one in the Bible is actually murder. So they say, murder is something that is for humans. Of course, in our legal system, you only get in trouble for murdering a human or a dog or like something like that. Oh yeah, you'll go to jail if you kill a dog. Yeah. You can't kill a dog here.
You get locked up.
Unless it's like, yeah, no problem. You can kill anything except for like a cat or like a domestic. Even then, if you go and kill somebody's cow and that's their property, then it's like it's like damaging their property. So, yeah. But the point is that like they say that murder only refers to human beings, but whereas we say that the jana, the citizens of the world, praja. It consists of all living entities, all animals and plants and everything like that. So we also say that to kill a cow or to kill a dog, that's also murder. Murder means unlawful killing. And so like if God puts forth certain laws, and if you break those laws, then it's something which is illegal. So the word murder is very fitting for somebody who wants to kill cows. You're murdering the cow. You can say that, they say that murdering is killing is different, but the word's murder. Anyways, you can get a lot into. Yeah. Same thing. It's like anna in in Indian languages. You have anna. It can mean a grain, but it can also mean just food in general. And you can call anything anna. But same thing in like Hebrew, the word meat. It can also refer to bread. So different cases like that. It's up to interpretation. Actually, whenever I did this thing with my grandmother, where I got a bunch of shlokas from the Bible that I wanted to present to her, I found all these things on my phone, and then whenever I went over to her house, like basically I just wrote down the verse numbers on my phone, and then I went there and I got one of her Bibles, and I tried to like open up and show her in her Bible, and her Bible had like different translations which didn't prove my point at all, and I looked like a fool actually. It was like there's one translation, it's like one should call out the holy name of the Lord and in prayer offer his respects, or like something like that, and it's like really like bona fide, And then I would open her book and it says like, like one should rise up and call out for the mercy, or like, it's like you can get something out of it, but it's like different translations, and you can't really prove any point with anybody. There's like, Even like people are fanatical about one translation of the Bible and they completely reject another translation, like King James and like all the Sahajiyas, the bogus modern Sahajiyas. They like the modern living translation. Xavier's Bible. Savior, like Xavier. Saint Xavier was probably some guy who had started the Sankirtan mission in English in India. Yeah, polyanity. It's a big mess. All of that's a really big mess. Janardhan has something. St. Paul. Yeah.
I was just going to ask a little clarification on when we say that not even like a blade of grass moves without the will of Krishna. Is that not him directly and more just also through like all the different energies and incarnations that are present in the material world?
So
or is it Krishna directly?
Krishna's in charge of all causes and all effects, and that's in the translation here. There's one, I think I marked it. There's one shloka in the Bhagavatam which explains. I might have deleted it. It explains that actually, for one in knowledge, they can see that within the cause of something, there's also the effect. Or within the effect of something, there's also the cause. So no matter how far away it seems like it is from Krishna, how many expansions he undergoes, and how many deputies he employs in performing his different activities, for one in knowledge, for one in Krishna consciousness, who is conscious of Krishna, they see that Krishna is directly involved in everything going on. Of course, you might understand this indirectly, but also directly there. You can see the direct correlation. It's not like we're just speculating, we're just saying, oh, anyways, Krishna is God, so this is happening. But there's explanations in Bhagavatam how Krishna is moving just a blade of grass, how Krishna is blowing the wind and everything like that. So, yeah.
So it's like kind of both direct and indirect at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. More so, if you directly see that Krishna is making the blade of grass move, you're probably considered to be more Krishna conscious. I mean, not necessarily. It's just like, it's a good thing to always think about Krishna, to be Krishna conscious in every single way. Even when we see the blade of grass move, we can think of Krishna instead of thinking about some impersonal wind or something like that. Even if we're thinking of Vayu, who is blowing the wind, then we can think about how Vayu is a servant of Krishna, and like in this way we can be Krishna conscious. Matajis have any questions or comments? No? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah.